right, you guys are good to go.
Thank you very much. Call the work session to order. First item on the agenda is volunteer recruitment and retention. Mr. Jeff McDonson, President of the Volunteer Fire Chiefs Association. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Gentlemen, board, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Just another fine and overheated day in Orange County, Virginia. So as we had previously discussed, along with the R&R opportunities and events and statuses that we have, I've also added some of the more major things that the Chiefs Association is working on.
You're fine, you can.
Gentlemen, if you move just to the agenda, I just did a high-level list there. We're going to talk about the 2 grants, and we've done a lot of work in both areas. And we're going to talk about the R&R coordinated training that we just hosted and completed, what the committee's doing and the plan status. Some of the organizations that we're reaching out to, we've been talking to or emailing back and forth with several of our surrounding counties, as well as some other counties, one of which I'm still working towards, and I'll get to that. And then other major initiatives that we have in progress and moving forward. So on the third slide, under the Volunteer Fire Chiefs, the Virginia Fire Chiefs Association grant, which is also a TIFA grant, we hosted the R&R coordinator course here in Orange County on the 26th and 7th of June. Essentially, all we paid for was the drinks and lunch. We got the course as a scholarship through our SAFER grant with IAFC and VFCA, so that was great. So now we have 3 certified coordinators in the county. Firefighter Bart Lace with Engine Company 24. He's also the deputy chief in Safford. John Farrell, who is an admin support CRM type person to the board of directors at Engine Company 29. And then myself as I was leading the R&R efforts. We also submitted our first volunteer workforce quarterly report that comes with that grant. It's a little, the report was a little light because we're just still coming out of COVID. We're finally lifting the restrictions. So we're just starting, and you'll see on some other slides, events that we have planned along the recruitment and retention and other things. However, the good thing is that over the last quarter, we picked up 5 new member candidates across the county and 1 junior, or I refer to him as a junior member. We really don't have a junior category at our fire companies. We re-WIC'd that years ago based on recommendations from the risk advisor company. We received and connected with 10 more candidates via social media. We're starting to see more and more through our social media and webpage contacts. And then we completed the first draft of our tailored Orange County recruitment and retention plan, which we're going to talk about in greater detail.
You need to submit quarterly reports for the grant, the people that give us the grant?
For the VFCA, yes. For the FEMA grant, Chief Mort takes care of those reports. How often do they go in?
Quarterly financials.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. The one for IAFC and VFC is more detailed. They want to know how many contacts, where we are, web pages, number of people retained on fire and EMS, everything.
Okay.
So, and then we're working with the IFC, VFC, which is the volunteer workforce solutions folks on additional funding opportunities to support some additional training and help us with brochures, things of that nature. On the FEMA grant, oh look, there's Whit Jacobs. on the FEMA grant side, at the very top of the slide, you can see the join Orange County VA FireEMS.org. That is our URL address that will take them to the landing page, our recruitment and retention landing page that is being developed as we speak. First arriving, I recently received a notional schedule for the first year. I didn't print it out because I hadn't sent it to Stephanie yet, and I don't need anybody beating me up on acquisition rules and regulations. But we're making great progress. We, the collective fire companies, including the EMS chief, have sent a lot of information to them that they're using on the landing page. And then a lot of that is gonna be hyperlinked and it's gonna go to specific point of context. And as we develop that, Chief Mort and I will bring that to you to demonstrate it at future work sessions. And then 5 sets of the structural PPE were procured using the FEMA grant money that Chief Mort made or tracks for us. Those were for 5 new candidates who have recently completed both the Firefighter 1 and Fire 2 certifications.
Who was first arriving?
First Horizon is the company that we hired to do the multimedia and marketing developments for us. Stephanie didn't come today, so I needed backup. In that arena, there's a lot going on. The landing page will be the big first step. And then we're gonna move into starting scheduling the videos, photographing on different events, training, and they will, towards the end of the first year, start developing new individual web pages and sites for each of the volunteer fire companies who want that. On the Orange County R&R Committee side, on the next slide, the first draft, if you remember when I got it to.
You said for the ones that want them.
Yes, sir.
Is this not a countywide initiative?
Well, this will be an upgrade to all the fire companies with a little challenge for 23, because they have a very robust site that does a lot for them, a lot of workflows, tracking systems, whatever. So we're trying, or they are coordinating with First Arriving to make sure all of that is covered. The biggest thing is that they use, what's their website provider? I forget. GoDaddy. They use primarily GoDaddy because it interfaces with Microsoft and all the other websites. One of our biggest challenges is going to be, as you know, we use the IM responding capability for our cell phones, and that does not interface with anything that we're doing. So we're looking at other options like active 911, whatever the case may be. You remember we received a few months ago they called it a tailored, but a R&R plan with a bunch of links and headers and stuff in it from the Virginia Fire Chiefs Association, and we took that along with contacting a lot of other counties and organizations, some of which Mr. Voorhees provided from previous work locations. And we have completed the first draft, and I mean it is a draft. The R&R committee is reviewing it now to make sure that Jeff and Don's actually knows English. And all those comments due back to me on the 18th so that we can do another set of revisions, and then we will publish that draft to the county as well as the companies. And we have an IAFC member, Spencer Cheatham, who's volunteered to look at it as well, and that's what he runs. What I did here is just give you some of the highlights. One is the outline. We're working on 2 things right now while the committee's reviewing the document. One is a SWOT analysis, right? We're all familiar with that, strengths and weaknesses. But more importantly, we're doing our needs assessment. And in simplistic terms, what we're doing is we're taking a particular piece of apparatus, like an engine, in Orange County, and saying we have to have a minimum of 3 people. So we're taking those numbers related to that particular apparatus across the county to assess what we need to operate at 100% if the world needs every fire truck that we have. And then based on that and based on our reoccurring attrition and so on and so forth, to determine what is the goals and the objectives that we need to bring numbers of new people in every year, how many people we need to retain, and then match that up to national standards so that we have targets that we're going after. What we don't want to do is arbitrarily throw out some marketing plan that brings in 50,000 people and we end up keeping 110 by the time you get through background checks and all that stuff. So we're developing position descriptions and everything like you're hiring them, but in this case, we're not paying them. Other things that we're putting in there that you're going to see when you get the draft is going to be recommendations for 2 things. One is incentives, financial and non-financial, and then a recommendation for a full-time Orange County recruit and retention coordinator. I've looked at a lot of the other surrounding areas like Fredericksburg and things of that nature, and where they've got a dedicated recruitment and retention coordinator, serving both to bring volunteers in and career staff. Their numbers are better, they're able to retain people because you have an independent person who doesn't work for the fire or public safety organizations. They tend to report to a mayor or a county administrator, and they can look at the organization's assess and see where our weaknesses are, and there's a whole list. And then on top of that, on the next two slides, there are just a series of incentives. These are thoughts that we're collecting from a lot of different counties, some of which you already do. This is not me saying this is my list. These are just recommendations to you gentlemen. And then it continues on to the next slide. And I broke it up between financial and non-financial. Two things that stood out that they're currently doing in Culpeper and Rappahannock County is that for the volunteer fire and EMS folks, if we were to be, well, for us, if we're hurt on the fire ground, right, we get transported, we don't pay for it. You know, we have an accident injury policy that takes care of medical bills. But what they've done is they've extended that transport out to the immediate family. So for Mort, it would be his wife and his 40 kids. So if they had to be transported, you know, they wouldn't be charged for a COFAM's transport. And in Culpeper, they have, and I'm still researching the actual insurance on it, they call it 5 cares. And what 5 care is that that immediate family of that firefighter or medic or EMT or whatever needs to be flown, then they have a separate insurance policy that covers the cost of that helicopter so that they're not having to pay for that.
With the programs they have, do they have any idea what, give you any concept of what those programs cost?
So for the ambulances, it's, you know, the standard transport fee. For the 5 care.
So I'm just saying, if they've said we're gonna do this, any idea what that affects their ambulance revenue for a period of a year or something like that?
No, sir, I don't. I haven't looked into it.
And if they've got the one for the flight, that would imagine there's an insurance program.
There is, and I haven't asked for it yet. I was gonna talk to Mr. Voorhees about it.
Right.
I wanna say it costs per fire company $100 a year for that helicopter issue. God, you know, with anybody's hope and fingers, of course, we'll never get put in a bird. But we're seeing more and more firefighters hurt on the fire ground after the incidents have actually been stabilized. Here in the last year, 70% of our injuries and deaths have been as a result of being hit when they're out on the road.
Another question about ambulance transports and things like that for a family would they still bill the insurance company if they have insurance for them?
Well, that changes per county.
Understand, you may have an individual who doesn't have insurance and others that do.
So in Culpeper, if they're transported, there's no bill. The county just covers the transport as part of their normal supply and operational costs. Some of the others are still getting me information like Winchester and things of that nature. Some are a little reluctant to share to a certain degree, especially when it comes to money. So
They don't want to know what the cost is.
Yeah, well, it could be. I don't know. I will tell you, and I think maybe Jim and I talked about this earlier. 3 of the most aggressive states right now with incentives is North Carolina, upstate New York, and Pennsylvania. I mean, astronomical things that they're doing, like free tax, all that other stuff, and it's not helped their numbers at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Not at all. And as I was talking to Laura earlier, in Vermont, I talked to them a lot because they have property up there, and I actually was offered the county chief job out there. They give those folks everything, like, you know, stipends and the whole bit, and their problem is they get, pick a number, 1,000 candidates per year, and they end up getting rid of 60% of them because what's driving the attention is, you know, I'll get paid for X number of dollars per call. And then when you go through the background process and the training and everything else, they have a high dropout rate or a high failure rate. And quite frankly, if you talk to a lot of career departments, I mean, you know this, you wrote EMS forever, you gotta wanna do this job whether you're paid or not. And there's a lot of people out there that don't wanna do this work. So there's no answer. There's no silver bullet. So we're gonna have to work hard at this. On the next slide, for the R&R committee, I already told you that the plan's out. They're gonna have comments back to me on the 13th. I submitted my first of what I hope to be a bi-weekly column or letter to the Orange County Review. That's going to cover a series of community risk and reduction type topics, major things that the Chiefs Association and county will be working on. In those cases, I'll make sure that I staff it with Mr. Voorhees ahead of time. But just keep them up to date on what we're doing. Yes, sir.
Can you also do it to the freelance store?
We can, but I think they'll charge us. But yeah, we can do that.
Well, you might be able to talk to Jeff Poole, he may be able to get it in.
All right, sir. I'll take care of it.
Because
Yeah.
the coverage.
Yes, sir. Yep, we'll do.
Have you had any public attendance so far? Or has this not started yet?
Public attendance at our meetings?
Yeah.
No, sir. We're targeting October,
Okay.
only because we're just lifting all the restrictions, and
Okay.
I'm going to pick Allison's brain and how we do this and
Okay.
whatever the case may be. And then I've also got a couple of requests into OEMS and BDFP because, I mean, obviously we always have to worry about HIPAA and other things. So I want to make sure we do it right. I do get a significant amount of emails and phone calls. I should never put my email address in the Orange County Review, but that's okay. You're right. So our goal is to do that, and as you know, I sent you gentlemen an email, and work with Mr. Voorhees. We're going to schedule 2 town hall meetings, one at each end of the county. We'll start advertising that early and get an opportunity for folks to come in and introduce them to their public safety organization, which includes Chief Moore. I haven't talked to the sheriff yet to see if he wants to participate, but this hopefully will give them an opportunity to voice, concerns, questions, whatever the case may be. And then, we'll see how well that works out. I don't want to make it all about we're the fire department. These are the main things that we do. I want to give them that platform where they can ask questions or whatever the case may be. That way maybe I'll get less phone calls and less emails. And then we're working on a whole series of dedicated R&R events. Obviously, now that we're starting to do things in public again, we're looking at doing a lot of things. So we're talking about like the town, what's the town fair, what's it called, Bert?
Street festival.
The street festival, whatever, where Engine Company 23 can represent all the engine companies and have a table there, and we'll have pamphlets and handouts and all those things that first arriving under the multimedia contract will help us develop. On the reaching out side, which is the next slide, obviously we're in contact frequently with the IAFC and the FCA, BWS, but we've been in contact, and Chief Mort's been helping with this. Louisa County, Caroline County, Potomac, Goochland, Culpeper. I've gone back to my old fire company in South Carolina, which is a combination fire organization now. The Virginia Fire Chiefs Association recommended I talk to Fauquier County because they're going through a lot of the changes that we're dealing with now, and they have recently, I don't know how recent, have become more of a combination organization, which is not what our plan is, but there's a lot of commonality in what they're doing and what we want to do. And then Mr. Marshall, I sent through the county administrator, I think, I know it's going to say this wrong, but Pittsylvania County. So I haven't sent an email to the chief yet to kind of pick their brain and look at some of the things that they're doing. This is not a Orange County problem. It is, right? If you look at it from the big picture, it's our problem, but there's a lot of organizations across the United States going through this. So there's no shortage of information out there. So that's the R&R side. Before I move into other items, do you gentlemen have any questions? I've been killing a lot of trees here lately, so.
Just there is a national night out next week down at Lakewood, or down at the lake.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, from 5 to 7 at the Sweet Bar. Would be they have, I think you have fire and rescue, you have the sheriff's department, a whole bunch of people coming in for that, so that may be an opportunity.
I'll make sure that the 2 chiefs are.
I'm sure that the volunteers down at 29 know that this is occurring.
Okay.
I don't know whether there's any material that you have that may be useful in presenting at that time.
All right, sir. Ms. Crozier, you had some questions?
Yes, just one real quick thing.
Yeah.
The company that you're working with.
Yes, sir.
everybody needs to be aware that they are not actively involved in any of this, but they are more of a, here you go, this is what you need to do type of a company, correct?
Right, they're a marketing PAO type organization with fire service experience, and all they're doing is development and brochures and stuff. So they're not driving anything that we're doing. I will tell you that their VP, Tyler, I always forget his last name, was one of the instructors at the coordinator course because he travels around and does instruction. But no, they have no input in anything we're doing other than we tell them we need flyers, banners, and things like that. So that's their forte. Any other questions?
You were saying,
Yes, sir.
certain states were very progressive as far as their incentive program,
Mhm.
not really, showed a lot of protection with the, results of that.
Right.
Any reasons why that's not working?
Yeah, so some of the more common ones that you see in a lot of the reports coming out of the state and out of the fire councils from FEMA is obviously we're targeting the younger generations, right? Because that's the future. I mean, people like me are getting old. I mean, I have a hard time getting out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning when my pager goes off. So they have a lot of conflicting requirements on their life if they're new families or starting a job, things of that nature. One of the biggest impacts to the volunteer service, both fire and EMS, is that every year the certification, training, and recertification requirements go up. So the certs my folks hold are no different than Chief Moore's. The difference is he can bring them in and pay them for 8 hours to go through a class, or they can work on that stuff for the 24 hours they're on shift or whatever. In the volunteer side, you know, to do a daytime class, we have to take vacation time from work, or we do it virtually if it's being offered, and then a lot of weekends and things of that nature. So that's the biggest challenge. It really is the biggest challenge. And you know, our call volumes are not slowing down. They're just arranging in different things. So 8 years ago, I was running structure fires like, you know, I couldn't forget. Now I spend 60% of my time, unfortunately, going to overdoses. But it's still a call for help, right? But it's interesting. I know we're at 200 calls. I think 23 is probably close to 250 calls already this year. 350. So. Okay, so other major initiatives. Obviously, we're working with the apparatus committee, gave me the final specs that they've requested or that they proposed to the Chiefs Association. We'll look at those and vote on them tomorrow, and then we'll be turning them into the county in support of the CIP plan. So this is for the 1 tanker and brush trucks. MOUs, we actually have 2 MOUs working right now. We've got the land radio, mobile radio MOU that we're working with Stephanie. I think Stephanie was going to send it back to the county attorney with some questions. I don't know if she's done that. And then we're, Mr. Voorhees and I are working on the draft service agreement. I took out all the legal language, concentrated on the bulk of, you know, that talks about accountability and doing audits and what's expected of us, that type of thing. And once the chiefs are done looking at that, I will provide it to him. And then, of course, the county attorney will add all the legal terms that I don't understand anyway. And we'll get that moving along to support the increase in operational funding. On the next page, we've also drafted up a 5-year plan for our training center. So we're basically coming up with notional schedules and items that we want to add to the training center, as well as ultimately replacing that building, which is probably 26 years old now. So it's reaching its life expectancy, so that we have a plan going forward and not as another document to dump in the lap of you gentlemen, but I need that document to submit for grants. There are a lot of training grants out there, and like everything else, I have to prove to them that we have a process in place and what we're thinking about. We are working, or we hope to get to sometime this year to start working on, is a revision to or an update to the Orange County Chiefs Association articles of incorporation and bylaws. They're extremely outdated. It's nothing like the way we operate. And there'll be a series of changes in there of, who can vote and how we collaborate and work with the county and things of that nature as well. So on the next page, this is basically a notional timeline. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot going on, a lot of irons in the fire, in addition to the call volume and everything else. I don't necessarily intend to go through all of this, but I give to you gentlemen so that you can look at it and throw questions at us or whatever the case may be. As we move forward, you could always email me, call me, or just yell at the county administrator and he'll yell at me and call me or whatever the case may be. But the end result is that, when we're done, hopefully within a year, it'll be a much cleaner, much organized, easily understood organization that is focused entirely on recruitment, retention, training, and how we operate financially, both running the fire trucks up the road and how we take care of the volunteers. There's a lot of folks out there with a lot of ideas. I was telling Mr. Crozier that I was at a call the other day with a 90-year-old woman who swore to God she remembers when I was a baby, and I'm not from this area, right? I moved here after I retired from the Navy, but that was okay. That's fine. And then there was a gentleman at a car accident who kept yelling at me and reminding me that he paid my salary. So I gave him Chief Mort's telephone number. I don't know if he's called in yet, but that's okay. I can tell you that the members from all the companies, and I've got 2 chiefs here, will tell you wholeheartedly that their focus is to make your life easier so that they can focus on training, certifications, and calls. So the least amount of time that they have to spend running bingo or whatever the case may be is the big thing that they're hoping not to have to do as we progress down this road. I can tell you, and I've already said it, that the amount of time doing just those 3 things is becoming astronomical. And we're getting tired. I know I'm getting tired, but I just turned 61 this year, so I'm not quite.
And he looks at me. That's all, huh?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, you guys.
Youngster.
21 years in the Navy between submarines and service ships will do that to you, right?
Yes.
So, any questions?
Notice who's got the white hair.
I just noticed it's getting longer. Why does it put it in a ponytail?
Anybody have anything?
Mr. White's got that look.
Yeah, the questions can he pose in that look in terms of a question. It seems to me that, obviously you're putting forth all of you, you're putting forth a great deal of effort here. Is there a way to get some feedback, not only for us, but for you during this process?
Right.
I mean, if you start down a path that looks like it's going to work or going to be helpful or going to pay dividends,
Right.
That's wonderful. If you keep trying the same thing with the same result, that it's not what you're looking for, it seems to me that that's important in this situation as well, because
Agreed.
as you said, you guys are really busy and dedicated, and you have to be getting something positive out of that.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, can we be certain that we're accomplishing something here, that you guys feel good about it, that you're getting the results that you need or want before we get, I hate to be having this conversation a year from now and say, we worked all year, we tried all these things, and we're not solving the problem.
Correct. So from a metric standpoint.
See, I didn't have a question.
From a metric standpoint, meaning numbers in, numbers out, retention, all of that stuff, I asked first arriving if the landing page can be built to provide that data or the tools that they're building for us. If not, what the recommendations are for software, and there's a lot of them out there. From a performance standpoint, and actually I've been thinking about that forever, is how do I come up with those key performance parameters, right? Those indicators, what does make sense? How do we measure if we're successful at, these event tables or at the high school program or things like that. And I've been throwing a lot of the emails out, asking people, how did you measure success in Parkhead County is the last thing I asked. So I'm getting some input, others say, let me think about it and I'll get back to you type thing. Because I think it's figuring out how to bound it is probably the hard part, and then how you bound it and, to come up with ideas and measure it, maybe it'd be a little easier, but we are looking at that, and I'm open to any thoughts or ideas or whatever the case may be. My cousin is a lieutenant in New York City, and when I tell him my first due is 101 square miles and his is 1.5 miles, first he calls me a liar. And then he tells me that New York City and Chicago, which are probably the two most largest well-known organizations in the fire service, been around forever, they have struggled with that, how to come up with those parameters themselves forever. And they're still trying to figure it out.
Do they have large volunteer cadres in those big cities?
So New York City no longer does,
Okay.
but pushing north, they do. And in Chicago, I think they have 2 or 3 firehouses that may still accept volunteers. Surprisingly, Northern Virginia is starting to accept volunteers again. And I don't know if that's more of a cost savings initiative. I don't know, sir. I can tell you that Northern Virginia doesn't take a whole lot of phone calls like everybody else does. So maybe Mr. Voorhees would have more luck, I don't know.
Well, the other part of this, which I think is probably related, is it seems to me the type of calls are something that raise at least some concerns. You mentioned the traffic calls.
Right.
Clearly there's an added risk to those types of calls if you're on an active highway.
Right.
And those kind of things. And it seems to me that somehow we almost have to separate the types of calls in such a way that volunteers understand what they're getting.
Right.
Getting in here. It's one thing to sort of be moved to help the little old lady in her home do whatever she needs. It's something else to be standing on, Route 20 at 4 o'clock in the morning, where the only people on the road couldn't walk across the road.
No, exactly.
We're responding to a false alarm at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that's the point. There's I'm sort of back to this reward for your effort kind of a notion. It's one thing to put yourself at risk in a situation where there's a clear need and it's within sort of the expectations. It's something else to have to deal with the false alarms and the fender benders or whatever else.
So one of the big changes, you'll see that when you get the first draft of the R&R plan, which is becoming a much all-inclusive document, is we are trying to standardize everything we're doing between all the departments, and one of which is how we bring new folks in. So we don't do 2 things very well as a collective fire safety organization. One is orientation, and the other one is the introduction to the service. So what we're looking at and what we're developing now is an orientation program that when we get that first interest, that we bring them into the respective fire department with their families, especially if they're younger folks, and take them around the departments, explain what we do, what are the risks, what are the safety concerns, why we train the way we train, work with the risk advisory group, so that we can take them on a ride along for a day, so that they can see what it's like to be on a fire truck or an ambulance or whatever the case may be. Because I don't want to lose track of the fact that all of our efforts on the R&R side is not just fire related, it's also EMS, right? So even though 29 has a dedicated EMS service, all of our fire companies have EMT providers, and we're getting added to more and more calls every day, as Chief Mort will attest to. So we still have to understand all that stuff and get released and things of that nature. So we're building a program based on that transitions once they're accepted, to a true mentoring program. So where we train people to be mentors, and to make people feel welcome in leadership and explain things. And so the problem is today we go immediately into an operational thinking, right? This is a fire truck, this is how we put fires, but there's a huge gap where we're not talking about, hey, these are the pros and cons, these are the benefits, this is why we do this, why we don't do it. You know, this is why we're helping people in the public, things of that nature. We don't do that very well. And that's because, over the years, being volunteers, we didn't have to worry about the whole HR requirement thing, but we do now. You know, we have policies in place for harassment and child abuse and, ethics policies and everything. Over the last 3 years, we've had to incorporate them. So we've even, I think Mr. Bory saw it, for my fire company, we have a financial policy. For 4 years, my accounting firm nagged the hell out of me, so we wrote one and they helped me build it. So, and that'll, be what we're committed to do as funding increases from you all, because, taxpayers have a right to expect that. But I don't have the answer to everything, sir, so maybe someday when you're on the tractor cutting corn or whatever the case may be, or Mr. Johnson's changing the tire, you might come up with a great idea and you can throw it at me.
I think you dragged into this.
The problem is I meet with Mr. Frame and all we talk about is our Navy days and we don't get anything accomplished. So.
All right, any other questions, comments?
Just a little bit of a comment, Mr. Chairman. Not having seen the draft MOU that Chief Mendonça mentioned will be coming in September, I don't want to overstate this piece, but just something for y'all to think about is when we last sort of tried to think about what that looked like, I sent some email out to board members asking a little bit for comment, and some of what I received were some information about different ways to think about that relationship. And so one example is Louisa County has a committee approach where each volunteer company has a budget review session, with the Louisa board and staff. We approach this more as the Chiefs Association does that, and then we send the funds to the Chiefs Association, who then sends it out to the departments. In some follow-up conversation, some from Mr. Marshall's thoughts about another jurisdiction, Pennsylvania County, they have a fire commission with some citizen representatives from 4 different quadrants of the county, and then 4 different volunteer agency reps, so a total of 8 people, and they serve in more of that liaison role, kind of a buffer between board and departments with a mix of fire and non-fire folks. So there's a lot of different approaches out there, different models. I just encourage us to be creative and thoughtful about how we want to do this. There's no one right way. There's the way that we hope works for Orange. And so if you have some other things you would like us to look at, please share either now or later, call, text, phone, stop by. I think we'll get more into the details once that draft comes our way, and then we'll have to sort of think about what works for us. So.
I can tell you we're going through bylaws revisions now at Mine Run, and for the first time in 75 years, we're looking at getting out of the business of running the fire company. My South Carolina Fire Department, our board of directors were people from the community. Most of them were, business owners, and their job was to run the business end of the fire company and help us apply for grants and things of that nature. And only chief and the assistant chief went to the board meetings. So there's a lot of options out there. So, it's somewhat of a challenge to be running the finances and asking for finances. It's kind of like a dual-edged sword. So.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Sir.
Thanks for your leadership on this.
No, yes, sir.
I really appreciate it.
Works for
Yeah.
All right. Next is proposed amendment to the subdivision ordinance regarding private road standards. Mr. Gillespie.
All right. Mr. Chair, board members, Mr. Administrator. This item presents a subdivision ordinance text change per direction from the board to prepare an amendment recognizing undeveloped subdivisions that were platted with private roads prior to the adoption of new road standards by the ordinance that was effective April 30th, 2018, first. And secondly, establishing a timeline for the development of such private roads under the standards that were in existence prior to April 30th, 2018. So when Orange County adopted that ordinance requiring new roads built to be public roads, except where private roads were approved by the planning commission, a number of platted subdivisions remained undeveloped. And I've spoken with, I think at this point, all 5 members about the issue, which has been in 4 of the districts. I don't think I've had one in District 5 yet in my time here.
We'll share.
Which absolutely, sure. We do field, just for discussion, we do field about 2 or 3 calls a week on completely separate, independent locations. And a rough query of our inquiries in Orange County, of which there are about 13,000 plus, yielded 13,000 plus parcels, identified about 1,363 parcels that are within 30 feet, 1,363 parcels that are vacant, that are within 30 feet of their parent private road upon which they intend for their access. Again, the platted paper private road, maybe a vacant road, maybe an established private road. The undeveloped subdivisions have been found recorded as distant in time as the 1980s. After I wrote this, we were contacted by somebody looking at one from 1979. So I said 1980s, but actually 1970s. And potentially further back. The proposed language would allow the development of these subdivisions with private roads instead of the public roads otherwise required at present without planning commission approval during a period equal to 5 years from the date of adopting those road standards, as if that had been done in 2018. That's just for discussion purposes. That was a number we talked about, 3 to 5 years when this was first brought up at a meeting, two meetings ago. Additionally, the proposed text change would streamline road construction standards by removing a bearing rating, first a bearing rating that's only present in one of the classes of private roads. And number 2, the pavement requirements present in also just one of the 3 classes of private roads. I will note that we feel there's a positive benefit fiscally or financially to the county by removing these restrictions over development rights. The department is working to identify location ownership of affected parcels to provide notice of proposed changes. So I tentatively identified 1,363 parcels. I don't have unique owners on this at this point, but I think it would be certainly important to reach out and give notice to those folks. So then just getting into the meat of it in the attachment, you'll see in the table. So this is a table piece with the header easement or right, well, not header, but the large text easement or right of way down in the 4th row where it's serving lots 8 to 10. Section C and D, we are proposing to strike the CBR, which is the California bearing rating, of less than or greater than, less than or equal to 10. We're proposing in column D to add a 2-inch surface aggregate as a pavement option, or retain asphalt and strike prime or double seal, which is a chip and tar, or the asphalt concrete. So we think that streamlines the road construction standards for private roads, where those private roads are previously platted and approved. That's basically what we're bringing forward to you. We think it's a positive change. I think it's very important to provide notice to those owners of the 1,300 plus parcels that this change is proposed, because if there's a time limit set on it, then we'll be back to this issue in 3 years. So that's what I'm bringing forward for you today.
I still have a problem with the time limit. We have many roads and that you all don't have records of. This is the county's fault. Prior times, people they've spent the money, gone to courthouse, platted, recorded, everything, and we don't have any. We have nothing on record. I dealt with one 2 weeks ago. The roads supposedly had been reserved. They'd been platted in the courthouse and everything. We had absolutely nothing. Somebody can produce a plat that they've recorded in the courthouse with the subdivision and the street dedications. I don't see where the 5-year comes into effect. This particular case, the man is retired. His intent all along had been to use subdividing his property as his retirement to fund as the years went on. And it just so happened that with what the market is right now, there's great interest, and he started going through, and it even affects his address. His address was supposed to have been changed. 06, it was never changed. So he said, you go to GPS, you can't even get to his house. So there's a lot of things here that when the landowner has gone through what the correct process was, I don't see the need for this 5 years.
Could the landowner have to go through planning to get it initially approved once it got filed with the court? The planning department never kept any records?
Yes, it has to go through the planning department to get signed off on so that it can be recorded.
But at the point it went through the planning department, there was no record kept of these things that happened over 2 years ago.
I will say, not just the planning department, but the 911 addressing. Things weren't done. They just weren't done.
Right.
And that's not saying that anybody did anything wrong. It's just things weren't done. And it's a different day and time now. But for these people that have gone through the expense and actually gone out, spent the money and done everything legally required.
So when they come back now to pursue this,
Right.
and from the planning department say, this is all new.
Right, yet they have a plat that has been recorded in the courthouse.
Okay.
And
And it'll have a note on there that says served by a private road.
exactly,
Okay.
And so the question is, do we honor that without a time restriction, but cause them, assuming the road hasn't been built, cause them to build the road to today's standards that are in the document, right? In my conversation with Justice, he knows, I think that we should not go down a path of taking something away that has already been approved by the county and documented properly in the circuit court. Meaning a plat.
And basically holding them to new standards.
But since they didn't build the road,
they have to build.
they have to build to the new standards.
Which is a reasonable expectation that.
And one of the new standards that James, just as a comment, I can assure you, we never meant to either call for or require a chip and tar private road. Anybody, those are nightmares. Even VDOT doesn't like to do those. Those are maintenance horror stories. And so taking that out.
They're problems.
They're clearly a problem. Either asphalt or leave it as an aggregate road or private road. Those are the only logical things. But I do think that applying the new standards is something that's important, because we don't want to perpetuate a long-standing problem with roads that can't meet the needs of the.
And that's where all this came from.
And that's how this got started.
Right, was to make sure that we didn't keep those problems.
Okay, so if they've done the plat, we're going to honor that plat. And we're not going to require any changes even though it's been 10 years.
We're
going back through the planning commission or anything, right?
Going back through that process.
Right.
That's all been done, it's been approved, there's no need for the expense associated with that.
However, when you do your construction, the roads have to be constructed to today's standards. That's. Anybody else have any? Or anything different?
You and I are dealing with a lot of these right now, so
Oh,
that's why we're.
nonstop.
If we were to not honor their original plan, what could that involve? I mean, I just, not that I'm going there, but I want to know the impact.
They would incur the cost of getting surveys done again. They would incur the cost of the engineering for the roads, all of this, as well as the recording costs and the costs for going through the planning department.
So all of that thing that they did 15 years ago would have to be repeated.
It would be nominal would. Yes.
I don't think 15 years ago, we required planning commission approval to do a private road. I think you had to buy right private road, so you just did as long as.
Right.
So they didn't go to any planning commission approval.
No, they didn't go through that, but the recording of everything
Okay.
and the.
But we also didn't apply any standards at that
No, we
point, and
didn't.
now there are standards. And so
All
the,
right, got
the
it.
real change is applying the standards, I think.
Which is what the intent was in 2018. That's what the intent was.
Not to require them to go through the whole procedure.
Exactly, exactly.
I'm okay with that.
And the language actually tells you that, if you sort of parse it carefully. Because what it says is I probably won't find the
What are you gonna do in
language.
case of somebody who put an entrance in, maybe for 50 feet, put some gravel down, and the rest of the road was just soil? But they took the trees out and maybe created ditch lines.
They'll have to come to today's standards.
Why? They've already built the road.
No, if they've
There
already
were no,
built,
there
Well,
were no,
okay, the
there were
road-
no
the road-
restrictions.
the road-
if they already built the road, they're good to go because they'll never have to come see us.
Right.
If they already built the
Yeah, but
road,
in my scenario, they didn't really do anything except put an entrance and 50 feet of gravel and then just soil from then on.
and
And graded the rest
Yeah,
of
they
it.
graded it out, but they didn't put the first piece of gravel down. after
There's lots of
50 feet.
places like that.
yeah, I was gonna say, that describes a good chunk of the county right now. so.
Right.
So I'm just pointing out that no matter what we do here,
There's,
in
there's
6 months from now, there's gonna be a problem. We're gonna have to go back and look at it again.
I've been one off of Flat Run that got potholes this deep.
oh, yeah, that's,
Because all we got is 2 ruts and potholes in each side.
well, and I always for Seminole Lane.
You put one tire up on the center and one over on the.
It's a Seminole Lane in Lee's district. I think there's 50 houses on it, and it is literally a goat path. And they're still building back there
Are there
because,
goats on the path?
there were 2, but one of them was an old goat. So, yeah, it's, all right,
Yeah, I've dealt with him.
yes. All right, where would we like to go with this, gentlemen?
You want complete honesty?
Yes, I know exactly what you'd like to do, but the shredder is broken.
So as this stands, this is doing what I'm hearing you want to do with respect to eliminating the chip and tar approach. It just doesn't meet your timeline piece for honoring the grandfathering. It's got a timeline to it, you prefer to.
Just not even,
So you would strike the words until April 30th, 2023.
Yeah.
If you strike those words, and then also you don't need the nothing contained sentence in there. So if you strike the until April 30th, 2023, we've now said when you build it, you gotta build it to current standards, but we haven't put a deadline on it. Okay.
So as time goes on, those standards could change.
Well, they could.
And
That's why you better go ahead and build it now.
right, and as time goes on, they will change.
20 years ago.
That's, yeah, but, there were a lot of reasons for a lot of these subdivisions being platted. And, I think it's actually catching up now to the point where people realize that they need to do something.
And then with respect to Mr. Johnson's point, every case will have essentially a determination that needs to be made, whether you did build a road or you didn't build a road. And it will rely on facts on the ground. If you just platted it, you did nothing
Yes.
to it, that's right. You did nothing to it, we might make a case you didn't do it.
And the interesting thing
You did grade it,
Part of it is
Drive on it.
merely graded and somebody's been using it for,
that
Right.
might be enough.
That's the other thing too, is with today's construction methods, just that dirt is not going to work if someone goes in there and puts in, say, a modular home. Because you're going to be bringing in 2 to 6 very large tractor trailers, a crane that is going to require a substantial base. So a lot of that stuff is going to be addressed during the construction process.
Well, that would come into road maintenance.
Well, it would,
This road needs some gravel on it now.
right. I mean, I know for a fact myself, I had a 120-ton crane that almost became a lawn ornament. So, but, all right, very good. Mr. White, anything else?
it was become a tourist attraction, did that?
That's exactly right.
Something that we probably need a discussion about, not necessarily today, but it sort of builds off of Mark's point. A lot of these are gonna be extensions where we built a segment of the road to serve the first 2 lots, which we would call a driveway. And now it's going to add, let's say, the 3rd and 4th lot where somebody's gonna build one. I think this covers that because it triggers something else, but we need to anticipate that and all be singing the same song, that you know, an extension to reach, you know, new construction, lots that are gonna be, you still apply these standards because it triggers the number of lots served. So
You apply it to that first stretch, so you build it.
well, that's where we need the conversation is. If it serves 2 today, we call it a driveway. If it adds another one, which is a 3rd, do you count the first 2 or just that one? And that's really my point.
And from what point?
Yeah.
And that, we wrestled with that for 6 of those 18 months, I believe.
It's, I just want to point to that. That's left unsettled at the moment. We can talk about it today if you want, but
But we do need to work towards the benefit of the citizens.
Oh, definitely, yes.
I mean, the table says total number of lots served, so in that example I gave, if you convert a driveway serving 2, let's just say, to where you're serving 3 or 4, meaning you're adding a couple, according to this, you would have to approve it to those standards, the 3 to 4 lot standard, the whole road.
Correct, that is how we apply it.
And
that seems reasonable because that's that's how many homes are being served.
But it's something else that we may need to look at in the future, or let another board look at, is
There we go.
when
even better.
a subdivision is platted. At that time, do the roads need to be constructed? Or do you wait until the development of the houses? Because if in fact those roads were improved at that point, it would take care of all of this. But it's not, like I said, it's something that we want to talk about down the road or a future board.
Well, these discussions inevitably lead to, you know, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? And, you know, there probably needs to be some thought given, maybe as Mr. White says, we need to have a conversation about that people can't just go in and plat something, put it on the shelf for 30 years.
Right.
Say, no, if if you want to do this, fine, but you're going to have to do it to a certain level of completion. Or else wait until you're ready to do that.
And what happens sometimes is a developer will plat a piece of property with, just say 4 lots. The lot all the way at the end gets sold. Well, this developer hasn't put a dime into the roads, and now the poor sap that bought that lot all the way in the back has to develop the road all the way back, and that's not fair. So I agree with you that we probably need to have in the future.
Buyer beware.
Well, that's the problem, where you draw the line between,
Right.
between buyer beware and we don't want a complete disaster on our hands.
Exactly.
And that's, it's hard to know where to draw that line.
There might be a way to deal with that until we get more precise about what we're looking for there. This does trigger the need for a road maintenance agreement.
It does.
And that road maintenance agreement could serve as the vehicle, because it could say, you know, the road needs to be maintained or constructed a certain way so that it can be maintained, you know, as an interim. That can be a living document that would help deal with this. Now, it puts the burden back on the county attorney and the planning administrator to deal with the individual cases, but that might be our only,
We already have a proposed form document that
Yeah.
they use to
Right.
sign off on.
And we have seen some where there may not have been a road maintenance agreement and the road's being extended, like in the description, the example you gave where you described 2 or 3 lots up front, add 3 or 4 more lots on top of it. And in that case, we would say, bring in the road maintenance agreement, and you've got your extension of an established private road.
right. What this really does is 2 things. It makes them use today's standards, but then it also adds in the requirement actually for the road.
Yeah, and the thing is that that's gotta be in the covenants on the deed. Which, you know, if you sell it to this guy and you don't put that in the deed, that he's part of a maintenance agreement, you end up with, you know, 3 people want a road, the other 3 don't, and, you know, and who ends up paying for it?
All right. Very good.
Okay, we handled that very well.
So we are moving this forward then with those changes that we talked about.
Yes, with those changes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna slip out, Mr. Lansing's taking over for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. All right. Now that we've talked about this in circles for 30 minutes. Thank you very much on that one, Josh. The next one is the proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance regarding accessory dwellings.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair and members, I did provide a link to some material that hopefully you were able to read in advance of the meeting, as requested at your last meeting 2 weeks ago. One of the things I thought that was best about this material from the American Planning Association was the graphic, which is inserted in the memo, kind of the cover memo here. It does illustrate some of the variety, actually, of accessory dwellings. This actually doesn't really illustrate the basement apartment, for example, but it does show how an ADU in the term that's abbreviated accessory dwelling unit can be detached, what we might think of as a rental cottage or some sort of mother-in-law suite cottage that's in the backyard. The attached ADU, which might be the converted garage, for example, ground level garage converted to an apartment, take out the garage door bays, put in a separate entrance door. The apartment over the garage, attached above garage, the interior basement ADU, which again, you can't see real well, but there's a visible red line in item number 4. The interior converted garage, number 5, not number 2. And then the one that's kind of the attic apartment or the garret that's up above the main heated normal living area. So that's a good graphic, I thought. There is a wealth of information from many advocates related to affordable housing, orderly community development, allowing things to happen in a more organic way that is relative to large acreage, but it's also relative to smaller city dwelling lots, like I talked about last time with the traditional neighborhood development in our planned development residential district, PDR, in General Wilderness area, for example, where we would expect to see accessory dwellings mapped. So what I have done is make note that, and I really didn't emphasize this last time as much as I should have, accessory apartment is a defined term in our code today. So if we go to page 2 and just go to that paragraph, everything on this section repeats from the material I gave you last time. So a little bit new on the cover, and then this is a repeat. So today in Orange County, an accessory apartment is defined as means a completely independent standalone dwelling unit located on the same lot as the single family dwelling to which it is accessory and which is subject to the following. And then these are the conditions we're familiar with about the not exceeding 800 gross square feet, exclusive of unconditioned basements and garages, for example. Not exceeding the square footage of the primary dwelling, so you couldn't have two tiny houses, both, one accessory to the other that's slightly larger. The accessory apartment shall not contain more than 2 bedrooms. That's also controlling or regulating like the 800 square feet. And then no lot shall contain more than 1 accessory apartment. Unfortunately, we don't know how many of these have been permitted in Orange County, which is why I suggested keeping this term in place, because we don't know how many are out there. And so it I believe, does no harm to keep the term in place. However, in response to Mr. White's points and Mr. Johnson's too about shared water and sewer services, wells and septics, and provisions for sanitary either water or wastewater may be shared, which is totally appropriate and fine, but it does begin to undermine the common sense, normal understanding of what completely independent standalone means when things are by necessity dependent, because the water and service to the main building is also served in the accessory building. So I would suggest that in the accessory apartment definition that we strike completely independent standalone. When you go back and look.
I think of that as talking about physically apart,
Correct.
not connected by a breezeway. It's just,
That would be illustration 1, sir.
Thank you. Yes, I don't see that as meaning independent in all ways. I mean, Orange County is independent of Greene County, but we're obviously part of Virginia, so we're not really completely standalone. I mean, that's not the best analogy I've ever used, but I read that strictly as and I don't think we can take it out, but the point I'm making is, to me, that's just talking about physically not connected, not a garage apartment or something like that. Yes, figure 1, as Mr. Treasurer hopefully pointed out.
Is there any site distance limitations on example number 1? Can you have it as far away as you want?
Sure, yeah, there's no requirement, as long as it doesn't
Quarter
approach,
mile?
if it's on the same parcel, sure.
Same
I mean, it's,
Still considered detached.
well,
accessory.
yeah, the accessory,
It's
correct.
completely independent.
Yeah, I mean, detached means you don't have more than one use attached to itself, right, or to each other, so a duplex would be essentially.
But there is no site distance.
Correct, and, but Mr. White's point about accessory and yours too, how does it relate to the primary if you're a quarter mile away? Is it truly accessory? I mean, in some rural farm setting, sure, you could have a guest house that's some distance away, and that's appropriate.
There's some other laws that people change the cover down.
That's where you want to be. A water hose and extension cord can reach a long way.
Well, the other thing is, if we're talking about something that's separated significantly, they would still have to meet appropriate water and sewer situation. So I might be able to run water a quarter mile, I'm not sure I can run the sewer a quarter mile.
Not without a pump station.
Yeah.
That's true, and again, we'd be talking in that kind of a scale, it's most likely we're talking about well and septic anyway, so most likely they're gonna have their own septic system distant from
Okay,
that.
I mean, but you could do that, separate well and septic system, all on the same parcel if it's big enough.
Yes,
So before I interrupted you, you were saying to take out the completely independent.
yes, I was asked this question last time, and I agree that normally if I'm having a conversation with someone about what the intent, the legislative intent was, that it was not to be completely independent, but that is the language, the bare language of it. And so I think instead of being confusing, just better to remove it.
Well, or just change it to it means an unattached dwelling
Unattached?
or unattached or a detached, you know.
Now, I'm looking at the accessory apartment and the dwelling unit accessory, and I'm trying to find differences between the two.
I think I've been here before, haven't I?
Yes. So major difference is there is no limitation on size in the accessory dwelling unit as a type. And so it encompasses accessory apartments. Accessory apartments have the special condition where they have the 800 square foot limitation. And the two bedrooms.
Mark, I'm trying to understand your point. You saying that we want the accessory apartment to only be a detached thing, like example one of his little graphic?
That's the way it is my understanding.
No, if someone were to have an accessory apartment today, even though it says standalone here, I do not interpret that to be standing alone on the lot. So if it were a basement apartment or a garage apartment within the building, it would be an accessory apartment. Because otherwise, we don't define accessory dwelling unit at all.
Well, I don't know how you could do that, given that it says a completely independent standalone dwelling. Knowing that, I understand why you want to take those words out of there now.
Someone wants to add converted garage to
That's why I asked the question,
Yeah,
because
I mean, I don't understand how you could come to that categorization.
Because a dwelling is a unit that allows for all the conveniences of living, a place to shower and bathe and prepare your meals and live and sleep. And so if you have something that's separate and apart of another dwelling, whether it's under the same roof, in the basement or whatever, it is separated and they can come and go, and that's a dwelling unit.
Yeah, that's got nothing to do with this. Okay, I didn't understand that you were doing it that way. Then what you're saying is if somebody's got a finished basement that's 900 feet, then they're in violation.
Only if it has to have a fire rated separation under the building code, it has to have a separate entrance, and it has to have a place to cook meals independently of the family. Right, I mean, it'd be a basement
There's
apartment.
probably quite a lot of people that have those. There's some people that have that and they're the only ones living in there. I mean, I was in a house recently that had several kitchens in it. I mean, it doesn't mean, the presence of a kitchen doesn't mean that it's a separate order. It means that somebody with enough money to afford, they don't want to have to walk upstairs to get to the kitchen, so they.
Sure.
So I don't like the way you're interpreting that, very frankly, because to me, it makes no sense.
That is the definition under the building code. So under the building code, food preparation requires a fire rated separation. And once you have that, if you can also come and go separately, then it's a separate unit.
So if I decide I want to protect my own house, if I want to put fire separation between the floors, then I'm creating dwelling units. If I've got a kitchen or whatever.
One structure, a separate dwelling unit, has a full kitchen as well. That is how these timeshares are deeded the way that they're deeded. One has a full kitchen, one has
I owned a house one time that had a full kitchen in the basement. I mean, but it was just us chickens that lived there, and we didn't rent out the basement.
If you're running it out.
So if I buy a house that's like that, then we started out. I feel like we started out talking about one thing, now we're talking about three other things.
I'm thinking of the person who takes a garage and converts it and puts a bathroom and a kitchenette in it, and but he doesn't separate it's a attached garage, and he doesn't put the separate fire barriers between the two units, and nobody ever even identifies it as an accessory apartment or a separate dwelling unit. just went ahead and did it.
This is a good illustration of why all this stuff
Yes, I agree with
gives
you.
me nausea, because we start going down rat holes that
Let me make
I
a
don't see any
suggestion.
outlet from.
We just set this entire section aside. Just set it aside, draft up a new one.
Okay.
Just don't even look at, because I'm in complete agreement with Mr. Johnson about the accessory apartment and all these terms. Draft a brand new.
Okay.
Just don't even look at it, just set it aside. Draft a one that you believe goes along with what we're looking for.
I would see an accessory apartment as part of the same structure. And I would see a separate dwelling unit as one that's separate.
As the pictures illustrate.
Whereas I'm looking at of the four pictures, 6 pictures,
But we seem to be getting hung up on terms that we already have existing.
5 of them would qualify as a separate apartment.
Right.
And the first one would be a separate dwelling unit.
Exactly. And that's what Mr. Johnson is saying as well.
Most of what I'm hearing is that we don't particularly care the form that they take. We want to allow them, within reason, to exist.
This all started because somebody wanted to build a house on their property other than the main house. I mean, that's where this started.
Yep.
But right now, supposedly, it's limited to 800 square feet. They wanted to build something that was bigger than 800 square feet. And now we've chased our tail around to where we're saying that somebody's basement is one of these things. And so
Yeah, I think if you.
I'm bewildered and confused.
If you go with the accessory apartment, that is a part of the building, then these limitations seem somewhat reasonable.
I actually think that Mr. Crozier maybe was correct. Maybe we need to have a committee that works with Josh on crafting this so that it makes sense from our point of view and also makes sense from Josh's point of view.
Absolutely.
So he can administer it.
Now, you say there's some, in terms of the building code, it has some definitions that may screw up our decision as to how to separate these?
And that's fine.
We can always name them something different.
Yes, and we can address the building code portion of it, customize it to what we are
Okay,
doing.
that's fine.
Make sure that our customization fits the building code.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I think there's a philosophical difference in understanding or interpretation of terms. And that's what we need to get past. I think we all want the same thing. We want people to be able to have a second structure on their property or additional square footage or.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying, we're saying, if it's detached, it can be bigger than 800. If it's attached, the 800 applies. And I think it makes some sense. Or do we no longer care what square footage?
I don't.
But there you get into if somebody's got let's say somebody has a 2,500 square foot house, the blueprint, and they have a full basement. Then that means that they would have to, they wouldn't be able to
Make a big apartment.
have a big apartment down there, and that just makes no sense.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
There's no county interest in that.
So do we remove the 800 limitation entirely?
Well, I think this committee should deal with that.
It could be that committee looks at how does it relate to the prime unit? It shouldn't be bigger than the principal unit, but maybe
Well, if
it's.
it's basement, it's probably.
Equal.
But my previous house, I had a 1,200 square foot apartment in the basement.
The other element, when we go to tenant housing, are we looking at tenant housing having more than just one separate dwelling unit? In other words, I could have multiple?
I think that's something for that committee to decide.
Okay, I mean, to me, that's a little bit different than just
Yeah, I mean, I think tenant housing, it has to meet the building code standard,
Right, period.
period.
Yeah, I think tenant houses, you can kind of tie that to acreage. You can, I can see where you can say you could have X number of tenant houses per acreage.
Right.
Because obviously somebody who's got 20 acres doesn't need 8 tenant houses. But somebody who's got 1,500 acres, they may well need eight tenant houses.
All right, so volunteers for this committee, Mr. Johnson?
I mean, I'll serve on it if that's the
I think the
pleasure of the
you two
board.
guys are the perfect team. Yeah,
Okay.
unless you want to be.
All right.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Which means we gotta accept what they think.
I would just have the same conversation.
Okay,
Well, we don't accept what we think.
very good.
Mr. Chair, if you're gonna appoint the committee,
We're not appointing a committee, we're merely having a discussion,
This is an ad hoc.
and we're
It's an ad hoc. I
considering
thought that was clear.
Mr. Johnson and I to talk
provide
about
some
it.
input.
There's only 2 people, no reporting,
There's
there's
an
no.
ad hoc.
Yes.
It's an ad hoc committee, it's not a standing committee.
Good?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Probably won't meet more than once or twice.
All right, gentlemen. We're adjourned for about 8 minutes.
Jolly.
Walker, can you
Oh, we're
pause,
having too much
or
fun.
put the recess screen up,
We're having too
please?
much fun. You get all that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Listen, I would strongly, we just gotta get you a beacon, just
That's
as a
not a
beacon.
problem.
Walker, can you resume the live stream, please?
You guys are all good?
Mr. Chairman, you're ready.
All right, thank you very much. I call the meeting to order. If everyone please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If there is no changes to the agenda, I entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next is special presentations and appearances. So I will move forward for life-saving awards. Mr. Warhead, was there anything you'd like to read prior to me getting up there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, a brief synopsis. On Tuesday, June 15th, 2021, Deputy Brian McFarland was en route to a call when he came upon a two-car accident, with one car overturned in a field and the other car approximately 100 yards further down the road. He stopped at the car in the field and helped the female driver out of the car. While assisting her, bystanders were yelling to direct his attention to the vehicle further away. That vehicle had caught on fire with a female trapped inside. Deputy McFarland quickly responded to the burning car, where he emptied his fire extinguisher, ran back to his animal control truck, grabbed a gallon of water, and poured that on the fire as well. Virginia Department of Transportation employees, Monaco Ratliff and Clico Ratliff, also attempted to extinguish the fire by emptying extinguishers from their VDOT vehicles, but they were unable to put out the fire either. With the fire starting to intensify, Deputy McFarland, Monaco and Clico were running out of resources to fight the blaze. Using quick thinking, Deputy McFarland went back to his truck, hooked a tow strap to the door of the crashed vehicle, and attempted to pull the door open. His first attempt was unsuccessful. However, he cut the strap and repositioned it, backed his vehicle up, and was able to get the door open long enough for Monaco and Clico to pull the victim to safety. If it were not for the courageous response and resourcefulness of Deputy McFarland and the help of VDOT employees Monaco Ratliff and Clico Ratliff, this crash could have resulted in a more tragic outcome. It is with great pleasure, Mr. Chairman, that we present these life-saving awards to Deputy Brian McFarland, Orange County Sheriff's Office, Monaco Ratliff, Virginia Department of Transportation, and Clico Ratliff, Virginia Department of Transportation. Please step forward.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Yeah, you can stand. Well, let's stand over here so we're not in the middle of the TV screen. Stand this way. However you would like. We have such a large room here.
Jim, I'd like to want a picture here.
Yes, I was going to say, Michelle, why don't you come on around and we'll just get a picture. Real quickly before I get these to you, I spent 30 years in fire and rescue service. It was very common to run calls all day long, all night long, and have all the information you needed when you arrived on the scene. Made it very easy to get there and do things in a relatively orderly fashion. The incident that you all rolled up on, nobody gave you any information beforehand. It was a rather unique situation with there being multiple vehicles and you were doing your daily jobs. It is, I can tell you from personal experience, it's not easy to just roll up on something and keep your mind about yourself and do things in a very orderly, intelligent, and calm manner, which all three of you did, and it is something that is absolutely way above and beyond call of duty, either as a VDOT employee or a deputy sheriff. I will read these to you quickly, and then both Alan Saunders and Sheriff Amos have some comments. Deputy Brian McFarland, whose heroic actions were directly responsible for a life-saving act on June 15, 2021, when he exhausted all onboard fire extinguishers and used quick, resourceful thinking to assist in safely evacuating the victim from a burning vehicle, ultimately resulting in his
and life-saving.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This certificate for Monica Ratliff, whose heroic efforts were directly responsible for a life-saving act on June 15th, 2021, when he assisted in safely evacuating the victim from a burning vehicle, ultimately resulting in saving a life. Monica. And Cleo, this certificate is awarded to Cleo Ratliff, whose heroic actions were directly responsible for a life-saving act on June 15th, 2021, when he assisted in safely evacuating the victim from a burning vehicle, ultimately resulting in saving a life. Thank you, gentlemen. Sheriff Amos, if you'd like to come up and say a couple of words.
In 35, I'm going on my 35th year here at the Sheriff's Office, and I have never seen a heroic act like I saw this. I did not see it in person. Brian was wearing his body camera. I did not put the body camera out to the public because the mother of the girl that was in the burning car did not want it out there, so I didn't put it out. But this man, excuse me, there was 3 times he almost gave up, and 3 times he found another resource to go to. When he ran a fire extinguisher, you can hear in his voice, he says, I'm out. And he kind of throws his hands up, but then he keeps on going. He goes to the back of his truck. He comes fumbles through the back of his truck. He realizes he has a strap. He grabs the strap. He hooks it up the first time. It doesn't open the door. He goes, I'm done. I'm out. Then he realizes I gotta move the strap. He cuts the strap with the sharpest knife I've ever seen in my life. He got a strap that wide. He went, repositioned it, and got the door open. These 2 gentlemen got her out. So, thank you to all of them.
Thank you. I knew you were here somewhere.
Yeah, hiding back behind the TV. I just wanted to say that your actions on that day and your courage they're humbling. And they set such a great example for the rest of us as public servants. And the family of the victim, she's remained in our thoughts throughout. But one of the things that really impressed me about all 3 of you is that after that event, you went back to work. You stood up, you joined your team, you went back to work. This is all in a day's work for you. And I'm always impressed about how you place yourself in harm's way, your frontline employees. You do this every single day, and we're very grateful for it. We really are. And this is a great opportunity. Thank you, Board of Supervisors, for taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Great technology. One other comment is that all 3 of these individuals are members of the community. They stepped up to help other people in the community. And in these times where everybody wants to yell something bad about everybody, it really shows the humanity of the people in this county, and it is greatly appreciated. Thank you again. Thank you. Now, if you all would like to stay, you can, or if you'd like to do the normal evacuation that happens.
I guess they're going to talk about business.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Congratulations.
Bye, young lady. All right, next is Booster Park Congressional Earmarking Request. Sean Meredith. District Coordinator and Grants Manager for Congresswoman Abigail Stanford.
All right, everyone, thank you all for having me here today. I'm glad that I have less of an audience now. As you all know, the Booster Park Revitalization Project that the county submitted as a part of the House Appropriations Committee's new community project funding process was included in the House draft of the legislation released by the Transportation and Housing and Urban Development Subcommittee. That did include the full funding request by the county for $122,000, $590. This week, we're very excited to announce that we fully expect that the full House of Representatives will vote on passage of the House Appropriations Bill that includes the funding for the Brewster Park Revitalization Project. Next step, it will go to the Senate. We do want to note that the bill must be passed in regular order, which would mean 60 senators for a final vote. These bills also must be passed by September 30th, 2021 in order for the US government to remain fully funded. That said, there is a possibility that Congress could punt and pass what's called a continuing resolution, just to extend the current funding levels until they come to an agreement on the new appropriations bills for fiscal year 2022. So we just wanted to share a status update on that. Again, we do expect the full House to pass the bill that includes the part of revitalization funding. We're very excited and committed to continue working with you all and county staff to get this over the finish line.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Along with that, we also appreciate the broadband efforts.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Next is consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Mr. Chair, I believe we'll need a roll call vote on that. Because there are a few items that appropriate money.
All right. In that case, Allison?
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall? Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Bridger?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye.
5-0.
Very good. Next, I see no new business, no old business, no department director, constitutional officer reports. Is there any county attorney's report?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. County administrator's report, Mr. Vargas.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
And I'm sure no one from this board has any comment. Mr. Brady.
No,
I think.
Other than, been a lot going on in Triad. A lot of activity, a lot of support for the elderly citizens of the county. Ron Kessner, who is the Triad coordinator out of the Sheriff's Office, has been doing a superb job. A lot of things going on, a lot of Project Lifesaver, a lot of projects in terms of the little phone things that people carry around their necks, and a tremendous amount in terms of working the scams that have been perpetrated against many of our elderly citizens. So a lot of work in that, and I would, plus there are probably 13, 14 volunteers that go out and take care of the people's little risks for the Project Lifesaver, keep those batteries up to date. So there's a pretty substantial group making Triad work in the county.
Mr. Johnson. Mr. White. Mr. Marshall.
No report.
Good. Informational items. Next would be appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. Mr. Johnson, here that you might have something that you'd like to do. Anyone else? Where are you looking?
I have it on the screen too, if that helps. Ms. Capel, Mr. Lamb, and Mr. Horace for VDOT Advisory Committee. All three I've contacted and they are interested and willing to be reappointed.
Okay, so I so nominate.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimous. I don't think there was any other appointments at this meeting.
None that I'm aware of.
Very good. All right, next is calendar items. We have consideration to schedule a public hearing for police property, county-owned property on Constitution Highway for Tuesday, August 10th. That work for everyone? So do Allison. And no other calendar items. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
No, sir.
Eric, could you please read the words?
Yes, sir. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Orange County desires to discuss in closed meeting the following matters: consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body concerning S-power litigation. Consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel concerning zoning issues. Whereas pursuant to section 2.2-3711A7 and A8 of the Code of Virginia, such discussion may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Orange County does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters in closed meeting, and we'll leave that as a motion.
So moved.
Second. Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
We are enclosed. This, fine.
Walker, can you put up the screen for closed meeting, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
No, that was the short version.
Walker, we're ready to return to live stream, please.
You guys are good to go?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you ready?
Yes.
All right, members of the board, to the best of your knowledge, were the only matters discussed in the closed meeting, public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and that only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. Mr. Crozier?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye.
And Mr. Marshall?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
At 5:58 PM.